Welcome to the Cumbria Business Growth Hub podcast. I'm joined today by Gemma Procter, Sustainable Tourism Officer at Cumbria Tourism.
Hello.
Today, we're going to be discussing, Today, we're going to be discussing the topic of food waste, its impact on business and the environment, and support available through Guardians of Grub. So, welcome to the podcast, Gemma. It's great to have you involved.
Hi, welcome. It's great to be here.
Brilliant. Okay, so we'll just dive straight into it. How big of an issue is food waste for businesses in the UK? And can you share some of the key stats around that?
Yeah, I can. Food waste for businesses, or food waste generally, is something that tends to be quite underestimated in the UK and something we don't tend to think about. In terms of the food and hospitality industry, it actually has a significant impact in its own right. So 1.1 million tonnes of food is thrown away per annum by businesses within the tourism and hospitality and food industry. And that is actually 1 in 6 meals that's served. So it's quite a staggering figure. And even more worrying is the fact that 75% of that food could have actually been eaten. So when we think about food waste or wasted food, we do tend to think about things like potato peelings or bread crusts, things that wouldn't normally be eaten, but actually quite a high proportion of the food that we're throwing away is stuff that could have actually been eaten.
Is it 1.1 million tons sounds like a lot of food. Is there any stats that kind of help you sort of quantify that in terms of football fields or how, is there any way you can illustrate that further?
Well, I think one of the biggest impacts that it actually has is carbon. So a lot of that food currently will go to landfill sites, and that produces an awful lot of carbon. Plus, there's a lot of carbon in the production of our food as well in the UK, well, just generally. So it does have quite a significant impact. And then if you look at it, I think the easiest way of looking at it is from the point of view of that carbon impact. So they reckon that if food waste was a country in its own right, it would be the third largest emitter of carbon after the US and China. So from the point of view of sort of that, how big a problem it is, that does kind of quantify it. It's globally, it is a massive problem.
Wow, yeah, that is shocking. So the main impact on the environment, you would say, is carbon emissions from decomposing food. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it then touches on a lot of other issues as well, though, because then if you look at food insecurity and you look at the fact that there's a lot of places across the UK that rely on food banks as well, if you kind of think about that social equality and the fact that we're throwing away such enormous amounts of food that could have been eaten whilst we've still got people living in poverty without access to food, that's also sort of quite a significant impact as well. And there are things that businesses can do to help that in terms of a lot of the apps that are around at the moment. So things like the Too Good To Go app with the magic bags and things like Olio as well. And there's also a lot of other local food waste redistribution programs. So yes, so whilst it does have that massive carbon impact, there's also other sort of social impacts to think about as well.
And the first sort of businesses you think of as restaurants, hospitality businesses. Is it mainly them that this concerns, or is it sort of other businesses as well?
It does concern every business. I think if you look in sort of food and drink businesses, they have that more significant impact. But even right down to personal waste from a resident population, that has a massive impact as well. And there's all things that we can be doing that are relevant to everybody just to help reduce the amount of food that's wasted. And it's quite simple things. Yeah, I mean, it does, I think every business, I mean, simpler recycling legislation is due to come in at the end of March this year. So that's already been implemented in Wales and Scotland, and it's about to come in the UK. And that is effective for any businesses that have 10 or more staff. And that means that those businesses will have to separate out their dry recycling, and they'll also have to separate out wasted food from their main waste streams. So it can't just go in the main bin anymore. And that's one of the reasons behind this, is to try and sort of show businesses that every business does have that impact in terms of wasted food, and to make sure that that element of wasted food, rather than going to landfill, is actually going to anaerobic digestion or composting, which again minimises that carbon impact and that impact on the environment.
Where does that food waste go when the council pick it up?
At the moment, it goes to a variety of places. So there are a lot of waste operators that already send food waste to anaerobic digestion, which is something that does have a lower carbon impact quite significantly. And it also has byproducts which are usable as well. So that produces a byproduct which can be used as a fertilizer, really good quality fertilizer, and it can also produce energy. So it's a much more carbon efficient way of using that food waste. But at the moment, for some businesses, if it's just put in the general waste bin, it will end up going into the main waste stream, which quite often then does end up in landfill.
So, in terms of other impacts that food waste could have on a business, what about the sort of business's bottom line and things like that?
Yeah, again, one of the things that businesses don't tend to think about is that impact of wasted food on their bottom line. A lot of businesses, when they're trying to quantify it, tend to think of it more about the cost of the food that they're purchasing in the first place. But WRAP, who are the government-funded organisation who kind of look at waste and recycling for the UK, they estimate that it's actually 10 times more than the cost of the food that's purchased. Because when you're looking at what you've actually put into that food to create a dish, you've got the staff time in terms of purchasing, you've got the storage, you've got the heating, you've got the cooking, you've got the staff time in terms of a chef and someone to serve it, and all those things have a cost. And all that cost is quite often neglected or not really factored in when we look at the cost of waste of food. So they estimate that actually, on average, for every food and drink outlet in the UK, the average cost of waste of food per annum is about £10,000. I mean, that's quite high, and that includes places like McDonald's, Pizza Hut, some massive, really high throughput operations. But actually, there's case studies of businesses within Cumbria, just sort of little local pubs and things like this. And actually, they have quite a significant food waste impact, which is sort of between sort of 2 and 6 grand, dependent on the business. For each individual business, it varies depending on the amount of food that you have going through the business. But actually, it can still be quite a significant impact on your bottom line. And again, at the moment, in the operating conditions that we've got, and because staff costs are high and energy costs are high, it's an increasing cost given the current economic situation.
Wow. Yeah, significant cost there. So, can we move on now to talk about Guardians of Grub and what can you just explain to everyone what is Guardians of Grub? How did you and your role at Cumbria Tourism get involved in it?
So Guardians of Grub is a national scheme which was put together by WRAP, the government organisation. They recognise that the food and drink industry and hospitality has a massive part to play in terms of reducing food waste, but also influencing consumers and getting some of these messages out. So they designed a scheme called the Guardians of Grub, which is specifically targeted and designed to help food and drink businesses and the hospitality industry. There's a number of resources within there. The main one is their 15-minute cost saving skills course, which is a really good little online course that you can do. And it just gives you an idea based on if you've got sort of figures in terms of what your average daily covers and things like that are, you can plug those in. You can plug in the industry that you're currently working in, and it will give you a bit of an idea in terms of the potential cost to your business in both carbon and financial costs of food waste. And then it will give you a bit of background of the different types of food waste and how to reduce them. The scheme is actually really interesting. You can get into it as much or as little as you want. So you can just do the 15-minute cost saving skills course and get some hints and tips from that. But then they also have things like quite an in-depth food waste calculator where you can monitor your food waste over a 4-week period and segment it out into different types of food waste because they quantify it by food waste from other activities. So things like if you've got buffet breakfasts and things like that on, they have it by prep waste, they have it by plate waste, and they have it by storage waste as well. So that's more about if you've got things going off in your freezer that you've not used and things like this. And once you actually set your waste out into those 4 different segments, you can kind of see which has the biggest impact on your business, and it gives you that clear steer in terms of where to start. And they've got some really good resources then of how you can reduce the different types of waste because there's different mechanisms for the different waste and where it's coming from.
So, what are some examples of businesses that you've worked with, strategies that they've used to reduce their food waste?
Some of the main things that businesses in Cumbria have managed to do, and one of the key ones, is implementing pre-ordering where possible. So again, this isn't possible for everybody. It totally depends on your business, but there is a business in Grasmere who, for key and special events, they have ordering only. So for Easter, Mother's Day, things like this, they get pre-bookings in and you have to pre-order your menu. And actually that really, really helps them in terms of making sure they've got exactly the right amount of whichever food in. There's pretty much zero waste at those times of year when they have that 100% pre-ordering. And one of the added benefits of it is it actually means that they can put more covers through on those days, because it's a quicker process in terms of they've got those pre-orders in, they're not sort of hanging around taking orders and things. It's much quicker throughput in the restaurant itself. So they've actually increased the number of covers they can do on those days by taking those pre-orders. So that's quite a significant one. And then there's quite a lot of other little mechanisms. We work with quite a lot of B&Bs. So obviously breakfast is quite a big one. And again, buffets and buffet breakfasts are a massive area for food waste because people tend to take more than they need. So those options around pre-ordering, if you can, really helps that. And you do tend to find that you have things on a breakfast dish like sausages or tomatoes that are a bit of a Marmite moment for people. They either love them or they hate them. So giving people those options either through pre-ordering or when ordering at the table, whether they want those extras or not, saves you serving them up and then just throwing them in the bin because they didn't really want them anyway. There was lots of things in terms of sort of engaging better with your customers that can really help reduce plate waste. And that can then sometimes also help reduce that prep waste and that storage waste because you're not prepping food that isn't going to be eaten and you're not storing food that isn't going to be eaten. So you can reduce what you're purchasing in the first place. There's a lot around stock check procedures and things like that as well, which are simple measures. A lot of businesses know them, but they do tend to slip as you get high staff turnover. And actually sort of reminding people of some of these little practices in terms of having a good checklist of what you do have in your freezer, making sure what goes out of date when, making sure you're using things, and then also using that information to then put on specials, which means that you do use some of that stock up before it goes out of date because you can produce your specials menu based around what you've got and what needs using. So there's loads of different things that you can do. And I think, you know, we do have some really good examples of businesses in Cumbria, and there are some case studies from Cumbrian businesses on the Guardians of Grub website and also on the Green Enterprise Hub website and on the Cumbria Tourism website. So it's probably worth having a look because we've got such a range of businesses, but we do have some really good businesses out there that are doing a lot of this already.
You talk there about employees and issues with having high staff turnover. How can your employees, how can you motivate them and train them to, stop wasting food or, help customers sort of pre-order and these processes and things like that?
Some of it is about embedding this within your organisation and your culture, really. So elements of this need to be part of your training procedures when you have a new member of staff and your induction procedures. And it needs to be kind of part of your, well, this is one of the things that we do, and it's kind of normalised behaviour. And staff also need to understand why you're doing it as well. So a little bit of background and information about those impacts does help communicate to them sort of why this is important. RAP again have some really good resources as part of their Guardians of Grub toolkit. So they have little videos that you can show to staff, and they have sort of little presentations that you can show to staff members as well. Getting them involved is the main way that you can get that buy-in as well. So RAP do recommend that you do segment your food waste, and so basically have 4 separate bins and put different types of food waste into 4 different bins. It is quite a time-consuming thing to do, and it can feel like a big ask, but you don't necessarily even have to do it for the 4-week monitoring period that they recommend. Even just doing it for a few days or for a week with members of staff, for the businesses that we've worked with, they've said that's had the biggest impact, because actually seeing physically that wasted food coming back into the kitchen or, from different areas of prep and things like this really brings it home how much of a proportion of the waste that you have is. And it also brings it home there's certain things that it flags with you. So we've had a lot of businesses who thought they were very good at food waste, and then when they've done the monitoring, they've identified that certain things kept coming back in, so things like toast from breakfast dishes, and it really got the staff kind of triggered and thinking, why are we getting so much toast coming back? What can we do about that? And then getting them involved in that process of actually physically seeing the problem, but then also to find ways of managing it and helping it. It does help with that kind of staff buy-in and support. And again, there are some great resources in terms of prepping that the Guardians of Grub have. So they have little master chef videos and masterclass videos you can access that just shows you the ways of prepping certain vegetables, which can significantly reduce your prep waste. It's down to like how you prep your peppers. It means you can get significantly more out of a pepper that doesn't go in the bin. So there's little things like that that can be kind of built into those training processes for staff. So it just embeds it in your sort of everyday practice, really.
Are there any additional benefits to reducing food waste on top of the obvious sustainability and financial benefits?
I think the key one is probably those two, the financial and the sustainability benefits. But an additional benefit is that in terms of your staffing, a lot of younger staff members do feel that they want to work for businesses. There's quite a lot of research out there that they want to work for businesses that share the same sort of social values as they do. And there is that growing awareness of sustainability. So in certain ways, showing that you are a green and sustainable business and getting them involved in that is something that can help that retention and that staff recruitment, because they realise that, they're working for an organisation that wants the same things as they do. So that can have a really big benefit. And I think the other one as well is down to these efficiencies of processes. So there's a lot of additional benefits that fall out of those efficiencies, because a lot of those things are already there in terms of, your stock control systems and things like that. But again, if those things can get a little bit lost amongst the hubbub and everything else that's going on. But if you embed those a lot more within your practices, not only does it reduce your wasted food, but it does reduce your costs. It makes you a lot more efficient. You're not buying stock that you don't need. So generally, it can just help make your business a lot more efficient anyway. And again, in terms of the pre-ordering and things like that, potentially it can help if you've got limited storage space in the kitchen, because you're not storing or ordering more than you need. And it can also help in terms of if you are doing pre-ordering days, you've got that potential where you might be able to up the number of covers you can get through, because you're operating much more efficiently in terms of serving people.
That's brilliant. Just as a final couple of thoughts here, Gemma, what advice would you give to businesses that are maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this stuff? And then how should businesses get involved with Guardians of Grub in order to reduce food waste?
I think in terms of overwhelmed, I think at the moment businesses really are kind of trying to do everything on minimum staffing and challenging budgets. But it's one of the things, I think there's a quote from one of the Thwaites businesses, pubs that actually took part in the Guardians of Grub. You think that you don't need this and this is going to be really hard, but actually it's not. And the benefits that you get out from it really do far outweigh the time and effort that you do need to put into it. I think food waste is one of those areas where there's quite a few simple solutions. You don't have to do everything at once. You can do absolutely all sorts of fantastic things, but even a few strategic, quite easy changes could have quite a big impact on your business. So I'd definitely say it's worth going and having a look at the 15-minute cost saving skills course that Guardians of Grub have on their website. So you can Google Guardians of Grub and it will take you through to that. CumbriaTourism.org are currently developing a resource hub on our website, which will flag through to a lot of these resources and include sort of some of the webinars and things that we've done in terms of composting, food waste redistribution, things like that as well. But it really is kind of have a look at that 15-minute cost saving skills course. There's a little online calculator that you can use. If you plug in your figures, it will give you an idea of what sort of cost you can save and what sort of carbon you can save from implementing different measures. And then it's really being strategic about it and just kind of saying, well, actually, you probably have a general gut feel as a business, the things that come back into your kitchen on a regular basis, the things that you do feel like you're wasting, the things that you can improve on. And then there's a resource kit out there. There's plenty of tools and easy online tools just to help you implement things like better stock control systems, to look at your menu, just quick and easy things to kind of say, well, actually, if we're getting a lot of chips back in the kitchen, I mean, that's a quick one. And you tend to find the two main wasted items on plates that come back through as plate waste tend to be chips, and they tend to be garnishes. So simply asking people when they order the dish, do you want the side salad? Do you want the garnish? Because a lot of people don't like different elements of that. So they might say no. Offering them a salad dressing with the garnish or the side salad, that can actually make a big impact in terms of the number of people eating it. I mean, there's brilliant case studies of people who serve coleslaw with everything, who've just asked, when people are ordering, do you want the coleslaw? And they've actually saved like millions of pounds worth of coleslaw over a year.
Wow.
Simply by asking that question. So there's very quick little changes you can make. And in terms of chips as well, it's kind of like actually look at your portion sizes. If it's a side portion of chips, how big does it need to be? And is there an opportunity to upsell or cross-sell chips? Are people ordering a set meal with garlic bread, but they want chips, so they're ordering chips as well? So one of those elements is probably going to be wasted. But actually, if you give them that option to say, for however much extra you can upgrade from garlic bread to chips, then you get less waste back in the kitchen and you're also making that additional sale as well. So it's kind of focusing on those things that you think are going to have a bigger impact for your individual business, really.
We'd urge everyone to Google Guardians of Grub and check out the program. And you can also head to cumbriabusinessgrowthhub.co.uk. And then if you click on Westmoreland and Furness Green Enterprise Hub, we've got some really good case studies and sustainability resources on there too. Yeah, but that's everything for now. So thanks so much, Gemma, for appearing on the podcast. and telling us all about this.
No worries.
See you later.
Bye.